We're joined by author Linda Sexton, who's here to talk about her brand new book. Linda, thank you so very much for being here today. I really do appreciate your time. All right, so your book, The Branches We Cherish, is an open adoption memoir, right?
Yes.
Okay, so before we get into the book, tell us about open adoption.
Yes, thank you, David. You know, when people think of the word adoption, usually what comes to mind is secretive, closed adoptions. But today, adoptions are very different than they used to be. So in the past, an adoptive family, adoptive parents, and the biological parents were often not known to each other. And then hence, the adopted child didn't really know much about their background, and it was difficult sometimes for them to even know their story or even get their birth certificate. So now, though, adoptions have changed so much, and it's more about being open and transparent, and it's about connecting the adoptive family with the biological family.
That's amazing.
And that's really changed.
That has changed a lot. Yeah, one of my dear friends, and he's in the band, he didn't know who his father was, right? And it was difficult, right? And then he didn't actually meet him until he was well into his 30s. And so it's very different. And then my cousin, she was actually adopted by the neighbor. And then, and then was raised the whole way. So she kind of had an open adoption. So that's very interesting. I've seen both sides of that. Okay, so what prompted you to write this book?
Well, I started the process with my husband about 30 years ago. And at that time, again, it was primarily closed and secretive. So when we did an open adoption 30 years ago, it was really, we were pioneers to do it. And the truth is, as much as it made sense to us and we wanted to connect with the biological families, it's scary. It's a scary proposition. And we had so many questions, like, how awkward is this going to be to raise a child with the birth mom in the picture? And will this child get confused? And if a birth mom comes back and holds her baby, is she going to want the baby back? You know, it can be pretty scary. So now, after 30 years, I really have the answers to all those questions, but I wrote the book to help the people who are coming after me. Since most adoptions are open today, I want them to know what was it really like for us, and help them get comfortable with this idea.
So, all right, so you were telling me you have more than 3 decades of experience with open adoptions, and you mentioned you have a relationship with all four birth parents, right?
That's
so you were talking about that. So, and the complexity of maybe having those folks still in the life. Let's talk about that. How did you manage that, and was it complex?
Yes. Well, adoption is always complex. And every story is very different and very unique. And that's the same thing. We have 2 adopted children, 4 years apart, and each of those were very different stories. But the fact is that we are still in contact with all 4 of them. So how was it? It was, well, first of all, we ended up getting transferred when the children were very small, so we lived in different states. And to be able to connect did take a lot of time and effort. In fact, we had to get on an airplane. But I would say that we found that we connected with the birth parents with visitation at least once a year, particularly in the early stages. And visits were wonderful. Our children loved seeing their birth parents. And in fact, they were never confused. In fact, I remember one time when my youngest daughter's birth dad, Ricky, came to see us, and our daughter asked him for permission to do something. And he looked at her and said, "You need to ask your parents that." And the thing is this is how it was. It is not co-parenting. You are absolutely the parent with all the responsibilities, all the joys, all the challenges of raising kids. But the thing that really struck me so much is when we were together, the biological parents, both birth moms and birth dads, they wanted us to be parents.
That's amazing.
And that's what really came through in our visits, that they wanted us to be the parents.
That's amazing. Linda, this is a very cool story. Unfortunately, I've run out of time for this. I got to send it over to Jordan, but where can we find the book real quick?
You can find it certainly on Amazon, anywhere books are sold, and at my website, lindarsexton.com.
Linda, thank you so very much. I really appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you,
David. Linda, Jordan, what's coming up?